Hi, my name is Taylor Dill, and I'm the PhD student for Battle for the Belt. Welcome to Season 2. We're out here at our first planting date, which was planted a little over a week ago on March 25th, and today is April 4th, and we're just out here checking for germination. And our corn has germinated. We've got a couple of roots coming out. Today at this location, it's 36 degrees. We had a little bit of hail earlier, and we're very wet from all the rain that we've had for the last couple of days. And now we'll go check out the soybeans. So we're out in the soybean plots now. Again, this is planting date 1. And our soybeans are also germinating. Got a root out here as well. And so the corn and soybeans seem to be pretty even right now. We'll see what the rest of this season brings us.
Well, thanks for joining us for Season 2 of Battle for the Belt. In case you did not follow along last year, we're going to summarize this project and what we found. I'm Lindsey. I'm the soybean agronomist at Ohio State.
Osler Ortez, corn agronomist at Ohio State.
So Battle for the Belt answers several important questions. First of all, which crop should we plant first, corn or soybean? We know that the planting window is fairly small, and we need to plant both crops timely. So when you don't have a lot of time, you have to figure out which crop to prioritize. On the other side of the coin, we're looking at which crop has the smallest yield penalty for delayed planting. How do we adjust our management practices to mitigate losses due to late planting? And then how are insects, diseases, weeds, and other factors affected by planting date? So for corn and soybean both, timely planting is extremely important. For corn, on average, we're estimating about 1.75 bushel per acre per day loss in yield for every day you plant after the end of April. Soybean has a similar yield response, but about a half bushel per acre per day loss when you plant after the end of April. But again, that planting window is extremely small, so this forces farmers to plant maybe in less ideal conditions, so maybe a little bit earlier than what they would want to, or a little bit later. So the bad news is that our planting window is getting smaller and continuing to get smaller. So between our ideal planting dates of April 17th and May 15th, there's been an average of 15 suitable field work days. And so this means 15 days not only to plant, but to do any tillage, herbicide application, fertilizer application. So it's a very small time frame to get a lot of work done. So Battle for the Belt really is answering what crop should you prioritize because this planting window is so extremely small.
And the way we go about it for these research questions, we establish a field project in 2023 crop season. We are having 5 different planting dates where we have corn and soybeans planted side by side at the 3 of our research stations, capturing 3 different research environmental conditions in the state of Ohio. The 5 planting windows that we are looking at, it includes ultra early planting, which that's anything between late March and early April. Planting day 2, we are looking at an early planting, which involves mid to late April planting time. We have a normal planting date window, which is early to mid-May. We have a late planting date window, which goes from late May to early June. And finally, our planting date 5 is a very late planting, which goes from mid to late June. Our research stations are indicated in this map: Northeast Ohio, Wayne County; Western Ohio, Clark County; and Northwest Ohio in Wood County. This work is being done at the university research stations managed by our staff members. In addition to the 5 planting dates, we are also asking the question, what other management factors can we or should we be evaluating when it comes to early planting versus late planting in corn and soybeans? For corn, part of the project also involves looking into 4 different hybrid relative maturities. That is a 100-day hybrid, a 107-day hybrid, 111, and 115-day. The idea there is that if we are moving from an early planting scenario to a late planting scenario, there might be a justification for adjusting those relative maturities if we are planting later, potentially benefiting from a shorter maturity, in this case for corn. On the other hand, we have soybeans. What management factors should we be considering when we are moving from early to late planting? And for soybeans, we are looking into 4 seeding rates, starting with 100,000 seeds per acre, 140,000, 180,000, and 210,000 seeds to the acre. And the idea there again is early planting dates, let's say early April, might benefit from a different seeding rate as compared to when we are coming out and planting soybeans late, let's say June, for instance. I will turn it over to Laura, and she will give us a brief snip of what happened on the soybean side.
Sure, this is just a small tidbit of what we saw last year, and we'll see what happens this year. But last year, again, we had 3 locations: Northwest Ohio, West Central Ohio, and Northeast Ohio. At all 3 locations, not surprisingly, planting date influenced soybean yield, but really not much effect of seeding rate at our first 2 locations, Northwest and West Central Ohio. In Worcester, Ohio and Northeast Ohio, we did have a planting date and seeding rate interaction. So that basically means when we planted earlier, we needed to have more seed compared to our more normal or later planting dates. And that was mostly due to low plant populations in April. So those April planting dates really had low plant populations where we needed a higher seeding rate. The other 2 locations, it didn't matter as much.
For the case of corn, this is the brief summary. We had a planting date and relative maturity interaction at the 3 research locations. That means that our planting date was affecting yield, but also that response was influenced by the different relative maturities that we were using in corn. That is very important. That's what we were expecting to see, and we will discuss a little bit more of results here in the next couple of slides.
All right, so the big question, what should we plant first? Corn or soybean?
Let's jump into it.
So we're going to jump into the results from Northwest Ohio. Again, this is Wood County. So what you're looking at on the same graph is corn and soybean yield response by planting date. So our planting dates are shown there on the bottom. So we had mid-April, late April, early May, late May, early June, and mid-June. The blue line shows corn yield, and the orange line shows soybean yield. So what you see for corn, really the first 3 planting dates were the highest yielding. So again, those were the 2 in April, and then the 1 in May, it was May 11th. And after you hit May 11th, corn yield goes down quite drastically. Soybean had the same ideal planting date, so soybean yield at this location was greatest when we planted in April. Then after April, yield declines very similar, the same date as corn, that May 11th date, but it's a much more subtle yield decline compared to corn. Northeast Ohio, this is Worcester campus. This is a little bit of a different trend compared to Northwest Ohio. In Northwest Ohio, earlier planting was best for both crops. Here in Northeast Ohio, the story's not quite the same. When we planted either crop in April, yields were lower, and yield was highest for both crops for our May 11th planting date. And after you hit May 11th, there's a yield decline. That yield decline is steeper for corn compared to soybean, but both crops decline in yield after you planted on May 11th. West Central Ohio, this is Clark County, Ohio. Not the trend you would expect at all, Osler, but For soybean, our highest yields were that first set of planting dates, and there's a decline once you go after about May 11th. Corn, on the other hand, had the highest yield when it was planted in June. So this is not what we would expect. Generally, you would see higher yields with earlier planting, but corn yield didn't do well with early planting last year. So I don't know, Osler, do you have any comments on why you think the corn did so poorly?
We had weekly presence in these plots through all the season, and basically early planting dates in April, conditions in the soil were pretty wet. It was cold. It took long for that crop to emerge. And then from wet and cold, it rapidly transitioned to being dry soil conditions. So what that impacted was we had also evidence of floppy corn. We believe that those wet first and dry later didn't really enhance a good growing environment for roots to establish. So there was a struggle going on there. When we went out and planted later in May or early June, those conditions were already shifting to better. And those better conditions pay out with higher corn yields. Certainly this result that we are seeing makes me look bad, because we generally recommend planting corn as early as last week of April or first week of May if the conditions are already appropriate for this crop. However, in this particular year, is 1 year, one occasion, we are seeing quite of a surprising trend. It will be interesting to see what else can we learn through the next couple of years as we continue this project.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this location is the soybean plants experience the exact same conditions that the corn plants experienced. So you can see how these different crops respond very differently to the exact same environmental conditions.
Both crops were planted the very same day, fields next to each other. So absolutely, that's quite the difference on that response, and just something to keep in mind. Crop responses do differ.
Absolutely. So for soybean, there were definitely planting date effects. There were some seeding rate effects, mostly in Northeast Ohio, where our plant population was very low, but they were fairly minimum seeding rate effects at the other location. For corn, all three locations, there were planting date by relative maturity effects or interactions. What we saw for soybean is that yields do decline as you plant later, but it tends to be a more gradual decline. For corn, at those two locations, it was a very sharp decline. And then the western location was just kind of an oddball location last year. And I think that points to the fact where we really need multiple years and multiple locations for this research. So, Battle for the Belt is continuing in 2024 this year. So we want to encourage you to follow along with Osler and myself and the rest of the team at Ohio State.
Excellent. One way to stay up to date on what is happening with Battle for the Belt, you have two options. You can subscribe now and look into the future new content, new material that we will be developing. The second option is you can actually also look back and see the contents that we generated over the 2023 growing season. What you see on the screen here is our YouTube channel, YouTube OSU Agronomy channel. What we have there, 33 videos covering about 6 hours of content, a small, short and sweet, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of content covering a range of topics: slugs damage, cold injury damage, herbicide, growing degree day calculations in the case of corn, looking into weeds, looking into yield estimates, and a lot more. So make sure to take that opportunity and see some of the work from last year, or stay tuned for what is coming ahead this year.
Yes, and we don't even know what we're going to have videos on this year yet because we're going to see what happens in the field. So it's real-time extension as we see it in the field. And of course, we always want to thank our farm managers, students, and staff for helping with this project. Having a study with 2 crops and 5 planting date and seeding rates and different hybrids is a great deal of work. So we're really grateful for the support of our Ohio State farm staff at all 3 locations.
In addition to sharing acknowledgement for our support around the state on this research project, we also would like to acknowledge our funding sources. That includes USDA through the North Central Extension Risk Management Education Program, support for research from Ohio Soybean Council, and also internal support from our college here at Ohio State University. All of this has allowed us the opportunity to keep going and have a PhD student on board and several other opportunities for research and education along the way.
All right, so stay tuned the rest of the summer to see how it goes.